Welcome to Religion Story YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. The light behind the wounds. David Emmanuel was still young, just 32, but already stood on grand pulpits as a pastor. His voice was bold, his insights wide-ranging, and his heart sincere in faith. He grew up in a religious family that held tightly to devotion and belief. Amid the uncertainty of the world, David was a figure of guidance to many. One night, after leading a spiritual retreat in a small village, David decided to take a shortcut home. Rain poured heavily. The road was slippery and dark. A large vehicle from the opposite direction sped by too fast. David tried to avoid it, but everything happened too quickly. A crash, shattering glass, and then darkness. When he awoke, he wasn't in a hospital, but in a modest house. The room was filled with the scent of wood and herbs. A young woman sat on a small chair beside his bed. Her face was calm, veiled, and her gaze was warm. "You're awake?" she asked gently. David tried to sit up, but pain shot through his body. "What happened?" "An accident. We found you not far from the main road. I brought you here because the hospital is quite far. But don't worry, a nurse from the village has been coming every day to treat your wounds." The woman introduced herself as Hannah. She lived with her elderly mother. Her father had passed away long ago. They didn't have much, but had enough to share. Days passed. David's physical wounds began to heal, but something inside him began to shift. He wasn't just healing physically, but spiritually. Hannah never discussed religion, never tried to argue with him, but David noticed. Every morning, Hannah would rise before dawn, purify herself, and stand in silence, facing a certain direction, bowing in deep peace. David watched quietly from behind the curtain. In Hannah's face, he saw sincerity, not obligation. "I want to ask you something," David said one afternoon. "What makes you so at peace?" Hannah looked at him, hesitated for a moment, then replied, "Maybe because I believe life isn't about holding control, but surrendering it to the one who created us." The answer struck his soul. From that moment, David began reading, first out of curiosity, then with thirst. He borrowed a translated Qur'an from one of Hannah's neighbors and read it quietly at night. He found names he recognized: Moses, Abraham, Jesus, but now in a different light. There was connection, continuity, and explanations he had never encountered before. It wasn't Hannah who convinced him. It was the honesty of his own heart. Once his body had healed, David returned to his old life. But his former world no longer felt the same. The pulpit felt empty. His prayers hollow. He felt like a stranger in his own existence. He withdrew, found solitude, and prayed not in formal rituals, but in heartfelt words. He cried. He admitted to himself that guidance had knocked on his heart. Months later, David returned to Hannah's home. This time, not as a broken and wounded man, but as someone who had found true strength. With eyes full of tears, he said, "I want to say the words I once only recited as an observer. But today, I say them as someone who truly believes. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah." Hannah bowed her head. Tears fell not of pride, but of emotion. She knew this wasn't because of her. This was because God had guided someone who truly sought him. And behind the wounds, a new light was born in the life of David Emmanuel, who now, for the first time, truly felt he had come to know God. David Emmanuel began his new life in silence. He didn't announce his decision. He didn't stand at a pulpit to explain. The world that once adored him as a young pastor now felt distant, and he knew there was a heavy price to pay for his choice. But he also knew, truth is not something to be bargained with for the sake of comfort. He left behind his title, his position, and even some friends who now saw him as lost. His family was devastated. His mother cried for days, sending long messages filled with verses and pleas for him to return to the right path. David replied briefly. I have not turned away from God, mother. I've found him more deeply than ever before. For a time, David lived on the outskirts of the city. He took on odd jobs, teaching language and translating online articles. He started learning how to read the Qur'an from scratch, sounding out Arabic letters that once felt foreign but now felt warm and familiar. He learned how to perform ablution, how to pray, how to fast, starting from the very beginning, with the spirit of a seeker hungry for light. Whenever he faced hardship, he remembered Hannah's face and the calmness in her demeanor. They rarely met after his conversion, not out of avoidance, but out of intention. David knew feelings had begun to grow. But he wanted to purify his heart first, to better himself before taking the next step. One day, after completing a Dawah training course for new Muslims, David was invited to speak at a small gathering about his journey. He spoke calmly. I didn't embrace Islam because I lost a debate. I didn't convert because I was disappointed in my former faith. In fact, I embraced Islam because I love God and I found that love more complete in Islam. People cried not because his story was dramatic, but because his sincerity touched them. A few days after the event, David gathered the courage to visit Hannah's home. He didn't come as a guest, but as a man ready to carry responsibility. Hannah welcomed him with the same soft smile she always had. I didn't come here just to remember the past, David said. I came to ask permission to begin the future. If you are willing, I want to make you my life partner. Not because I owe you anything, but because I believe Allah placed you in my life for a reason. Hannah lowered her gaze. She didn't answer immediately. Then, in a soft voice, she said, I never expected anything from you. But if Allah has placed that conviction in your heart, then inshallah, I am ready to walk this path with you. They married in a simple ceremony, witnessed by Hannah's family and a few of David's fellow converts. It wasn't grand. It didn't go viral. But it was full of prayers and peace. Years passed. David became a mentor for new Muslims, wrote a book about his journey, and devoted his life to bridging the misunderstandings between the faiths that had once divided people. He and Hannah lived modestly, but their home was never without light. In their living room hung a small calligraphy that read, Whomever Allah wills to guide, He opens their heart to Islam. And David Emmanuel, who once stood on an altar in a pastor's robe, now bowed on a prayer mat with his forehead touching the earth, having found the true meaning of devotion. It has been almost 2 years since David Emmanuel declared his Shahada and began a new life with Hannah. Slowly, he became known among converts as a patient and wise guide. He never judged his old religion, in fact, many admired him for his calm and open-minded approach. However, one wound in David's life had not yet healed, his relationship with his family. His mother, a strong woman who raised him with faith and love, still couldn't accept the reality that her son, the young pastor whom the church and society had once proudly admired, had now become a Muslim. To me, you're dead, David, his mother said during their last phone conversation. The child we raised would never just leave his God. David remained silent. His heart was shattered. Not because of the accusation, but because he knew his mother didn't see what had truly happened, that he had found God, not abandoned him. His father, a retired preacher who was strict and principled, was even colder. He never called. Never replied to messages. Never looked at David when they accidentally met at a relative's funeral. Even more painful, his younger sibling, who had once been very close to him, posted on social media, A traitor to the faith no longer deserves to be called a brother. Hannah saw all of this. She knew David was carrying a heavy burden. Every night, in her long prostrations, Hannah prayed for her mother-in-law's heart, and the hearts of David's family, to soften. Be patient, Hannah said one night. Even the prophets were rejected by their own families. But they still prayed for them, did not retaliate. David nodded. But his heart still longed. One day, while he was giving a small lecture, David received a text from an unknown number. Mom is sick. Bad. If you still consider her your mother, come home. Elizabeth. It was his sister. David rushed. No matter what kind of reception he would get, he knew this wasn't about ego, it was about duty. He returned to his childhood home. The house that used to be warm now felt foreign. Elizabeth opened the door with a neutral expression. She can't speak yet. But she's conscious. Come in. David entered his mother's room. The elderly woman's face was pale, her body weak, but her eyes were open. Slowly, David approached, sat beside the bed, and held her hand. Mom, it's me, David. His voice was hoarse. Tears flowed down her cheeks. But she didn't pull her hand away. David kissed it gently. I never stopped loving you, Mom. I'm just following the light I found. But a child's love never changes. David's mother couldn't answer. But her gaze was deep, long. As if she was weighing something. That day, David didn't stay long. But the next day, he returned. This time, with Hannah. His mother was still weak, but when she saw Hannah, she furrowed her brow. She saved me, Mom. When I had an accident when no one cared. Hannah lowered her head politely. She didn't say anything, just smiled. Then she whispered a greeting. Assalamu alaikum, Mom. For the first time, David's mother didn't look away. She didn't answer, but she didn't reject it either. Weeks passed. His mother's health improved little by little. David and Hannah continued to visit, slowly rebuilding the bridge that had once crumbled. Elizabeth began to soften. Even his father, though still keeping his distance, started to show signs that the door wasn't truly closed. One quiet afternoon, as they sat on the porch with his mother in a wheelchair, David heard the words he had longed to hear. I don't understand your choice, David, his mother said softly. But I see you're better than before. Maybe God works in ways we don't understand. David held back his tears. You don't have to agree, Mom. Just embrace me as your son. That's enough. His mother opened her arms, and David embraced her. For the first time in years, he felt like he was home. 7 years had passed since David Emmanuel embraced Islam and built a new life with Hannah. Their home was simple, but always filled with laughter, books, and the scent of cinnamon from Hannah's kitchen as she enjoyed cooking. In the middle of that home, ran a little boy, 6 years old, named Isa Emmanuel. They chose the name with great meaning. Isa as a tribute to the prophet who was important in both David's old and new faith. And Emmanuel as a reminder of the long journey that shaped the father's identity. Isa grew up surrounded by abundant love, but also in a world that did not always accept difference. At home, he was taught to read the Qur'an from an early age. David taught him with a soft voice, never forcing, just sparking his curiosity. Abi, Isa asked one evening, who is Prophet Isa? David smiled, looking at his son who was holding a picture storybook. Prophet Isa is a messenger of Allah. He taught love, patience, and sincerity. Just like Prophet Muhammad. Both were brothers in mission, only their times and places were different. Isa nodded, though he didn't fully understand. But David knew, the foundation of values had to begin with simple stories. However, challenges began when Isa started school. Some of Isa's classmates' parents started to ask. His dad used to be a priest, now he's a Muslim. That's strange. His dad is a foreigner, but he's fasting. What religion is Isa really? Hannah once cried silently after hearing Isa tell her. My friend said I'm a weird mix, Ummi. David responded wisely. He sat down with Isa and said. You're not a weird mix. You're special. You're a bridge. You can explain to the world that difference is not a threat, but a richness. One day, the school held a Diversity Day event. Parents were asked to share the origins of their families. David and Hannah attended. David stood in front of the teachers and parents. He didn't talk about being a convert, nor did he bring up controversial topics. He simply said, "I grew up in a different faith than the one I follow now. But one thing hasn't changed: I love God. And I want my child to grow up not just knowing his religion, but also loving the truth, loving others, and loving peace." There was a brief silence. Then applause echoed. Some parents approached them after the event. One mother said, "I don't agree with your choice, but I respect how you raise your child." For David and Hannah, that was enough. They didn't want Isa to become a victim of a black and white narrative. They wanted him to grow up as a spiritually strong child, but also open-minded and kind. At home, Isa began to memorize short verses. But he also learned the stories of Moses splitting the sea, David writing beautiful poetry, and Isa healing the blind. He knew Prophet Muhammad as a gentle and just leader. He learned that the truth is not narrow. And that faith is not just a label, but a reflection of action. At night, when Isa had fallen asleep, David and Hannah often talked. "Have you ever regretted it?" Hannah asked one evening. David gazed at the ceiling, then held his wife's hand. "No. I lost many things, but I gained something much greater: the truth, peace, and both of you." David never imagined this moment would come. After years of avoiding a conversation that never happened, and years of living with prayers and hopes, his father finally came into his home, to the doorstep of his life he had once left behind. One afternoon, as David and Hannah were sitting in the living room, casually talking about their quiet day, the doorbell rang. David opened the door, and there, standing in front of him, was the old man he knew so well, his father, Pastor Jonathan Emmanuel. His face looked older, more wrinkled, and the stern lines on his face were still there, but there was something different. There was no anger in his eyes, just an unusual calmness. "David," his father said, his voice hoarse. "I've come to talk." David stood silent for a moment. This was not the conversation he had hoped for. But it was a conversation long overdue. "Come in, father," David said in a soft voice. He guided his father to sit in the chair in front of them. Hannah, who had sensed the tension from the start, just gave a gentle smile and went to the kitchen to prepare drinks. His father sat down, still looking at David with an unreadable expression. "What have you done with your life?" Pastor Jonathan finally asked, his tone quieter than David had imagined. David took a deep breath to calm himself. "Father, I'm following a path that I believe is right." "That path Islam is not the truth, David," his father said firmly, though his voice was weak. "You know what I've taught you. I taught you to love Christ, to hold fast to the faith passed down through our ancestors. Then you chose a completely different path." David looked at his father, not with anger or disappointment, but with a deep understanding. "Father, I haven't left Christ. I've just found him in a different form. Prophet Isa still lives in my heart. I love him just like I always did. It's just that I've also learned to know Muhammad, and I believe that is the path that brings true peace to me." His father lowered his head, as though processing those words. There was a long silence, so still. Hannah returned to the living room with 2 cups of hot tea. She placed them on the table and sat next to David, giving space for this difficult conversation. Pastor Jonathan looked at David challengingly, and after a few long seconds, he said, "It's not that I don't love you, David. I'm just afraid. I'm afraid of losing you, afraid that I will lose the son I once was so proud of." David grasped his father's hand, and with a gentle voice, he said, "Father, I'm still your son. I've never left you. I still love you, even though we are different. God isn't just in one religion. He's in our hearts, and if we love him, that's enough." His father fell silent, staring at David's hand holding his. His eyes, once filled with anger, began to well up with tears. "I still don't understand," his father said, his voice barely audible. "But I'm starting to understand that you chose this path not out of foolishness, but because of your belief. You truly feel this is the right path for you." David nodded slowly. Yes, Father. That's why I chose this path. Not because of hatred, not because of rejection, but because I feel at peace with God, and with myself. There was a longer silence after that. Pastor Jonathan looked at his grandson, Isa, who was playing in the corner of the room. Isa smiled, then ran toward his grandfather. Is this your grandson? His father asked in a much softer voice, as if seeing the future in the eyes of the little child. Yes, Father. This is Isa, our son, David answered proudly. Isa raised his hand and said innocently, Assalamu alaikum, Grandpa. Those words gently seemed to tear down the hardened walls in his grandfather's heart. He didn't reply, but his gaze softened, as though understanding was slowly growing within him. Without saying a word, he reached for little Isa's hand and hugged him tightly. That night, after a long conversation full of tension and silence, David's father finally stood up. Before leaving, he said, I may not understand the path you've chosen, but you're still my son, David. And I will keep praying for you, no matter what happens. David simply smiled, tears flowing freely. Thank you, Father. That's more than enough. With this conversation, David felt a long-held burden finally lifted a little. There's no shortcut in accepting differences, especially in a family with such deep traditions. But that small step, his father accepting his decision, was a big step in reconciling hearts. Welcome to Religion Story YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Thank you. In a big city full of chaos, there lived a man named Arman. He was the leader of a gang known for being ruthless and unbeatable. The gang he led controlled many areas, and Arman himself had committed countless criminal acts. His heart was hard, and his view of life was limited to power, money, and the fear he spread among his enemies. One day, Arman was arrested along with several of his men in a large-scale operation. They were all brought to prison on serious charges. Despite being in prison, Arman still felt superior to everything around him. However, behind bars, his life began to change when he met a prisoner who was different from the others. The man's name was Abdullah, a Muslim who was caught in a minor case, but more known for his calmness and peaceful way of life. Abdullah always appeared calm even amid the turmoil and tension in prison. One day, Arman approached him and asked how he could be so peaceful despite being in such a violent and hateful environment. Abdullah patiently replied, "What calms my heart is not because I am in prison, but because I have found peace in Islam. Islam teaches me to love others, not to repay evil with evil, and to always remember Allah in every step of life." Arman felt curious. Although his heart was hard, something in Abdullah's words intrigued him. He began to listen more about Islam, how the religion teaches kindness, justice, and forgiveness. Day by day, Abdullah taught Arman little by little about the teachings of Islam, and something began to change within Arman. He started to feel the emptiness in his life that was filled with violence and hatred. Months passed, and Arman felt his heart growing closer to Islam. However, he also felt afraid to leave the old world he had built over the years. He worried about how his men would see him, whether they would accept his change or view him as a traitor. One night, after a long conversation with Abdullah, Arman finally made a big decision. He wanted to embrace Islam, not only for himself but also to set an example for his men who were already trapped in the world of crime. On that day, together with Abdullah, Arman recited the 2 testimonies of faith, declaring belief in Allah and His Messenger. Not only Arman decided to embrace Islam. Some of his men, who had seen their leader as a role model, were also moved to follow in his footsteps. They began to study Islam together, with Abdullah as their teacher in prison. Slowly, one by one, they began to feel the change in their lives. Life in prison began to change as well. There was no more conflict, no more violence between the prisoners. Those who once lived in fear and hatred now began to support each other and guide one another to become better individuals. Arman and his men began to plan their lives after leaving prison, with the hope of becoming better people and benefiting others. After they were freed, Armin and the gangsters who were once known for their brutality returned to society, but this time they were no longer people who spread fear. They became agents of change, teaching the importance of living in peace and loving one another. Armin knew that his life's journey had just begun, and he was determined to stay on the right path, remembering Allah in every step he took. And so, the story of Armin and his subordinates, who were once feared gangsters, became a real example that nothing is impossible for someone who wants to change and return to the right path. Islam had transformed their lives, giving them new hope, and teaching them to live with love and compassion. After getting out of prison, Armin and his men began facing new challenges in their lives. The outside world was not as easy as they had imagined. Many still recognized them as gangsters, and some people had difficulty accepting the changes they were going through. However, Armin and his friends knew that true change took time, and they would not back down. In the beginning, Armin struggled to distance himself from his old world. Some of his former colleagues and enemies tried to pull him back into a life full of violence and crime. They mocked Armin's change, saying that he was just making excuses to escape his responsibilities as a gang leader. However, Armin patiently responded to all of this. Every time he faced temptation to return to the past, he remembered the teachings of Islam, which taught patience and perseverance. Armin and his former subordinates began engaging in more positive activities. They started a business together in a field far from the criminal world, a small venture aimed at providing jobs for marginalized people. They also became involved in social activities, providing assistance to orphans and needy families. They began to build trust with the local community, although it was not an easy task. On the other hand, Abdullah, who had become a close friend of Armin, continued to provide spiritual support. He encouraged Armin to remain consistent in his worship, strengthen his faith, and keep learning about Islam. Every time Armin felt weak, Abdullah was there to remind him to turn back to Allah. Armin's transformation also affected those around him. His former gang members, who had once been trapped in a world of violence and drugs, now felt peace in their hearts. They began to remind each other not to fall into a life full of desires, but to live with a more noble purpose. Some of them even began to preach, sharing their experiences about how Islam had changed their lives and trying to guide others who were still stuck in the dark life. One day, Armin had the opportunity to speak in front of a group of young people who had once been involved in criminal activities. He shared his life story, how he had once been filled with hatred and violence, until he found Islam, which brought him peace. Armin reminded them that it is never too late to change, that everyone has the chance to improve themselves and redeem the sins they have committed. Islam is not just about performing rituals, but about a change of heart, Armin said confidently. What matters most is not where we come from, but where we are heading. If we want to change, we must start with ourselves. Armin's words touched many hearts. Some of the young people began to open their hearts to learn more about Islam. They did not immediately accept it, but they promised to try, to learn, and to seek the truth. Years passed, and Armin, along with his men who had returned to the right path, continued to fight to maintain their faith and spread goodness. Although the outside world sometimes tempted them to return to their old life, they knew that true happiness lay in the peace of heart that comes from religion and good deeds. Armin became more and more certain that his life journey, full of struggles and mistakes, was the path that had been destined to make him a better person. He learned that life is not just about fighting for oneself, but also about providing benefits for others. As a former gangster leader who had now become a devout Muslim, Armin realized that true change comes from a sincere heart that desires goodness, and that Allah always opens the door for his servants who wish to return to his path. Thus, Armin's story became a true tale that anyone, regardless of their background, could find the path to truth and change if they are willing to open their hearts and follow the light shown by Islam. A story of hope, repentance, and compassion that not only changed one life but also had a positive impact on many people around him. The end of Armin's story is one of peace and sincere devotion. After years of striving to live according to the teachings of Islam, Arman had become a person very different from the gangster figure he was once known as. The new life he led with his followers, who were now also believers, was full of dedication to the community and sincerity in doing good deeds. Although many challenges still lay ahead, especially from their dark pasts, Arman felt that his life now had a clear direction. He was active in preaching, helping at-risk youth avoid falling into crime, and giving a real example of the great power of a changed heart. His efforts in providing job opportunities for those in need were also growing, offering many people a chance to escape poverty and hardship. One day, after years of self-improvement, Arman was diagnosed with a serious illness. Despite the illness, he remained patient and grateful for all that Allah had given him. In his final days, Arman was surrounded by family, friends, and followers who now all lived in goodness. They remembered him not as the figure who once spread fear and violence, but as a leader who had shown them that it was never too late to change. In his final moments, Arman spoke meaningful words to his loyal followers: never stop seeking goodness, even when the world feels dark. Allah always provides a way for his servants who want to change. He passed away peacefully, surrounded by prayers and hopes from those who had been inspired by his transformation. Arman's story became a legend among the people, a tale of repentance, hope, and forgiveness. The community remembered him as someone who had made a great change in his life and became a symbol that nothing is impossible for someone who sincerely wants to change. Even after his death, the values Arman instilled continued to live on through the charity and efforts he had started, benefiting many people who continued to remember his goodness. And in the end, Arman's story teaches us that every life journey, no matter how dark our past may be, always has a chance to end in peace if we choose to walk the right path. Welcome to Religion Story YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. A convert to Islam in India refers to an individual who embraces Islam after previously being a follower of another religion or having no religion. India has a long history of the spread of Islam, which began in the 7th century with the arrival of Muslim traders and later flourished under Muslim rule, such as during the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughal Empire. Today, Islam is the second largest religion in India after Hinduism, with over 14% of the country's population being Muslim. The process of becoming a convert in India typically involves the recitation of the Shahada, which is the declaration that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger. Many converts come from various religious backgrounds, such as Hinduism, Christianity, and other local religions. Some also come from lower social groups, choosing Islam due to the common principles of social justice offered in Islamic teachings. There are various reasons why someone in India might choose to embrace Islam, including spiritual search. Some individuals are drawn to Islamic teachings due to the inner peace they find in its principles. Interfaith marriages. There are many cases where a person converts because they marry a Muslim. In some cases, the family of the spouse may urge or suggest embracing Islam in order to continue the relationship. Dissatisfaction with their previous religion. Some people choose Islam because they are dissatisfied with their previous religion, whether in terms of spirituality or worldview. Cultural and social influence. In some communities in India, religious conversion can also be influenced by broader social or cultural pressures. Converts in India often face various challenges, socially, culturally, and within their families. Some of the main challenges they face include: converts are often viewed with suspicion by family members or members of society who still adhere to their previous religion. They may face discrimination and social exclusion. The process of converting often involves significant changes in one's social life and identity. Some converts may feel alienated from their families or their communities, especially if their conversion is not accepted by those around them. In India, which has the largest Hindu population in the world, religious issues are often political. Religious conversion can worsen inter-religious tensions, and converts may become involved in political debates surrounding religious identity. Although Islam teaches acceptance of converts, in reality, some Muslim communities in India may also view converts with skepticism or even make it difficult for them to be fully accepted into society. There are several organizations and institutions that help converts in India navigate their new lives, providing religious education, social assistance, and psychological support. Some of them also focus on economic empowerment and education, helping converts better integrate into Muslim communities. Converts in India are an important part of the history and dynamics of Islam in the country. While they face many challenges in the conversion process and daily life, many of them find peace and comfort in Islam. At the same time, it is important to view the experiences of converts as a reflection of broader social, religious, and political changes in India. The life of converts to Islam, Mu'allaf, in India has various dimensions influenced by social, cultural, religious, and political factors. Their process of adapting after embracing Islam can vary greatly, depending on individual background, geographical location, and the attitudes of the surrounding society. Several aspects of the life of Mu'allaf in India can be seen from the following perspectives. Converts in India often face significant challenges in terms of social acceptance, especially if they come from communities with very different religious or traditional backgrounds. Social stigma can arise against them, particularly in highly religious and conservative environments. One of the greatest challenges faced by Mu'allaf is their relationship with their family. In many cases, families who still adhere to the original religion may feel disappointed or angry about the decision of a family member to convert. This can lead to social isolation or even estrangement from the family. Mu'allaf sometimes find it difficult to be fully accepted within the Muslim community, especially if they come from different social or ethnic groups. Although Islam teaches acceptance and brotherhood, sometimes converts feel marginalized in terms of culture or religious practices. For Mu'allaf, living according to Islamic teachings is a very important aspect. The process of learning about Islam can be a significant part of their lives. After embracing Islam, many Mu'allaf get involved in deeper religious studies. The economic situation of Mu'allaf in India can also be affected by their conversion to Islam. Many converts may start a new life in a new social and economic context. Some Mu'allaf may face difficulties in finding a job or being accepted at work after their conversion, especially if they come from social or religious groups that are considered lower by the Hindu majority or other communities. However, there are also Mu'allaf who manage to build new careers after joining the Muslim community. Some Islamic organizations in India provide economic assistance, education, and skill training to help Mu'allaf adapt to their new lives. This can be very important, especially for those from lower economic backgrounds. The life of Mu'allaf in India is strongly influenced by their religious, social, and cultural background before converting to Islam. Mu'allaf face challenges in terms of social acceptance, adaptation to religious traditions, and changes in their cultural and economic identities. However, many also find spiritual comfort and peace in Islam, even though this process often involves significant adjustments in many aspects of their lives. One of the interesting stories about converts in India is the story of Qamar, a man from a Hindu background who embraced Islam after a profound spiritual journey. Qamar's story illustrates how the search for inner peace can lead to religious conversion, as well as the challenges faced after deciding to become a convert. Qamar was born and raised in a devout Hindu family in a small town in Uttar Pradesh, India. From a young age, he was taught Hindu teachings by his parents and participated in various religious rituals and ceremonies. Although he appreciated the religious values he was taught, Qamar felt a deep emptiness in his life. He felt that despite following the religion wholeheartedly, he had not found true inner peace. At the age of 22, Qamar began to feel anxious about his spiritual life. Many questions arose in his mind. What is the purpose of my life? Why don't I feel at peace even though I am doing everything my religion teaches? He began searching for ways to find answers to this inner turmoil. In his search, Qamar started reading religious books from various traditions, including the Qur'an. He was drawn to the concepts found in Islam, such as the oneness of God, Tawhid, and the inner peace promised through devotion to Allah. What intrigued him the most was the concept that Allah is the most merciful and forgiving, and that every human being can have a personal relationship with God. Qamar began visiting local mosques to discuss with scholars and members of the Muslim community. Every time he spoke with them, he felt closer to Islam. One key moment for Qamar was when an imam explained that Islam teaches the pursuit of truth and peace in life, without being trapped in doubt or excessive worry. After months of seeking understanding and reflecting, Qamar decided to embrace Islam. He recited the 2 testimonies of faith, Shahada, in front of an imam at the local mosque, feeling a peace he had never experienced before. Although he felt at peace with his decision, Qamar faced many challenges after becoming a convert. First, his family was very shocked and disappointed. His parents, who were deeply committed to Hindu teachings, could not accept their son's decision to change religion. They felt lost and worried about his future. Qamar was often scolded and regarded as a traitor by his family, which caused tension in their relationship. In addition, Qamar also faced social challenges. In the town where he lived, Muslims were a minority, and religious conversion was often viewed with suspicion. Although the Muslim community there accepted Qamar with open arms, he still felt isolated from his old friends, who came from the Hindu community. However, Qamar remained firm in his decision. He continued to study Islam more deeply, striving to understand and practice its teachings in daily life. He began living a calmer life, focusing on worship, and helping others in his community. After a few years, Qamar's parents began to notice positive changes in him. They realized that although Qamar had chosen a different religion, he remained a good, honest, and loving son. Eventually, they began to accept his life choices, though they did not fully understand Islam. Qamar's family was able to speak with him without anger, although they continued to practice Hinduism. Welcome to Religion Story YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Thank you. Converts to Islam in Cambodia refer to individuals or groups who decide to embrace Islam after previously following another religion or belief system. The process of becoming a convert in Cambodia, a country where the majority of the population practices Buddhism, is fascinating because although Islam is a minority religion, there is a long history and strong relationship between the country and Muslims, particularly in areas like Kampong Cham and Phnom Penh. Islam was first introduced to Cambodia in the 15th century by traders from Arabia and India. Since then, the Muslim community began to grow, especially in coastal areas and regions that became trade routes. Despite Cambodia being more known for its Buddhist majority, Islam has remained a minority religion, constituting around 3 to 4% of the total population. In Cambodia, becoming a convert typically involves a process that includes the recitation of the Shahada, the 2 testimonies of faith in Islam, which is the main requirement for someone to embrace Islam. Additionally, they learn about Islamic teachings, such as prayer, fasting, zakat, charitable giving, and others. The Muslim community in Cambodia generally supports those who wish to convert, offering religious guidance and understanding of the Muslim way of life. This can be seen in the many mosques, which also function as centers for Islamic education. Converts often receive assistance from local Islamic organizations in their adaptation to Muslim life, including learning Arabic and basic knowledge of Islamic teachings. Converts in Cambodia play an important role in strengthening the existing Muslim community. They not only increase the number of Muslims but also enrich the cultural diversity within Cambodia's Muslim society. Many converts come from ethnic Khmer backgrounds, but there are also those from various ethnic groups and social backgrounds. The Muslim community in Cambodia, despite being a minority, generally coexists harmoniously with the larger Buddhist population. However, as converts, they sometimes face challenges in dealing with cultural and religious differences. Still, many feel that Islam provides peace and a deeper spiritual understanding. Converts in Cambodia represent an interesting spiritual phenomenon, where individuals choose to embrace Islam despite being in a society with a Buddhist majority. They are part of the growing Muslim community in Cambodia and contribute positively to the social and religious life of the country. The conversion of Buddhist followers to Islam, including in countries like Cambodia, can be caused by various personal, social, and spiritual factors. Here are some reasons why some Buddhists decide to embrace Islam. Buddhism teaches the path to inner peace and enlightenment through meditation and self-control. However, some people may feel that Buddhist teachings do not fully satisfy their search for deeper spiritual peace or clearer direction in life. Islam, with its comprehensive guidance, including structured worship, regular prayers, salat, and other moral obligations, often appeals to those who feel they need more directed and easily understood spiritual guidance. In many Southeast Asian countries, including Cambodia, family and community are very important in a person's life. Some people from families with members who have already embraced Islam may feel closer to the religion, and when they marry a Muslim partner or become part of a Muslim community, they may be influenced to embrace Islam. This can create a stronger sense of unity and attachment within the society. With the increase in global communication, some people may be influenced by aspects of Islamic culture, such as art, architecture, and education. This influence may lead to an interest in understanding and ultimately embracing Islam. Social media and digital communication networks also play a major role in spreading information about Islam, which may be more accessible to those curious about the religion. Islam teaches total submission to God, Allah, which for some can be a strong attraction. Followers of Islam believe in the oneness of God, Tawhid, and its clearly structured teachings, providing strong convictions about the meaning of life and the ultimate purpose of existence. This can appeal to individuals seeking clearer answers about their existence and their relationship with God. In some cases, social and economic factors can influence a person's decision to convert to Islam. For example, they may feel they would receive more social and material support within the Muslim community. In some contexts, converts may also gain better access to education and job opportunities. Often, individuals who convert to Islam feel a stronger connection with the Muslim community, whether through friends, family, or even in everyday interactions. The kindness, hospitality, and teachings of Islam, which emphasize tolerance, justice, and peace, can make someone feel comfortable and drawn to embrace the religion. Some individuals who decide to convert to Islam may be motivated by personal experiences or testimonies from others who have already embraced Islam. This could involve a spiritual experience or personal testimony from friends or family that changes their views on religion and life. The decision to convert is a deeply personal spiritual journey, and in the case of Buddhists converting to Islam, factors related to the search for meaning in life, inner peace, and social influence play a significant role. Although Islam is a minority religion in countries like Cambodia, the prospect of finding deeper spiritual peace or a stronger social bond with the Muslim community is often the primary reason someone chooses to embrace Islam. One of the interesting stories about a Buddhist convert in Cambodia is the story of a man named Soka, a pseudonym, who comes from Kampong Cham, a province with a large Muslim community in Cambodia. Soka was born and raised in a devout Buddhist family in Kampong Cham, an area where the majority of the population is Buddhist. Since childhood, Soka was accustomed to following Buddhist rituals, including meditation, prayers, and religious celebrations. However, despite feeling comfortable in his belief, Soka often felt that something was missing in his spiritual quest. At the age of 25, Soka began to feel confused and sought deeper inner peace. He felt that although Buddhist teachings provided tranquility and enlightenment, they did not offer satisfying answers about the larger purpose of life and the relationship between humans and God. Soka felt he lacked clear guidance in facing everyday challenges and searching for a deeper meaning of life. One day, Soka met a Muslim friend who had recently moved to Kampong Cham. This friend, named Abdul, was a Muslim merchant from a Cambodian Muslim family. Abdul and Soka started talking often, and Soka became interested in his new friend's life and beliefs. Abdul did not force Islam on Soka, but he slowly introduced him to Islamic teachings, explaining the concept of Tawhid, the oneness of God, and the importance of sincere worship. One thing that attracted Soka was the highly structured concept of Islam, especially in terms of prayer 5 times a day, which provided him with discipline and a sense of closeness to God. As time went by, Soka began reading books about Islam and meeting several members of the Muslim community in Kampong Cham. They showed him that Islam is a religion that teaches peace, love, and concern for others. Soka was impressed by these teachings and increasingly felt that Islam provided a more comprehensive explanation of life, death, and the afterlife. However, what touched Soka's heart the most was the Islamic principle of the oneness of God and the teaching to dedicate one's entire life to Allah. This concept gave him the peace and clarity he had been searching for all along. Soka felt a call in his heart to embrace this religion. One blessed day, Soka decided to take a big step in his life. In front of his Muslim friends, he recited the Shahada, the declaration of faith, proclaiming his acceptance of Islam as his new faith. "I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah," Soka said as he recited the Shahada for the first time. At that moment, he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his heart, and he felt peaceful and calm. He believed that this decision was the right path for him. After becoming a Muslim, Soka began to learn more about Islamic teachings, such as prayer, fasting, and other obligations. Although he faced challenges, particularly from his family who remained devout Buddhists and the social environment around him, which was predominantly Buddhist, Soka remained confident that he had found the right path. The Muslim community in Kampong Cham fully supported him in his new journey as a Muslim. They taught him about Islamic teachings and helped him in the adaptation process. Soka experienced many positive changes in his life. He felt calmer, more directed, and closer to God. Soka's story is an example of how someone can find spiritual peace in Islam, despite coming from a different religious background. Soka's journey to Islam was not only a personal search for the meaning of life but also a testament to how social interaction and the positive influence of Muslim friends can open the door for someone to embrace a new religion. As a convert, Soka felt that he had finally found the peace and purpose in life that he had been searching for all along.